Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Conversations with Rudy Rivera. Today, I have the distinguished honor of having as my guest today Major General Byron Bagby, retired Army General. We're going to talk about a number of interesting issues today. Byron, thank you for coming on my show. Oh, and by the way, click and subscribe before I forget. Subscribe to the channel. There are going to be more interesting interviews on this channel as throughout the years. Hello, Byron. Thank you for joining us.
Well, Rudy, first, thank you very much for having me on your show. I appreciate the invitation. And just up front, thank you for what you do for moving corporate America forward and what you do in your respective communities. But it's always a pleasure to interact with you, Rudy. And thanks again for having me on your show today.
Well, you're welcome. I always think it's really good to pay things forward and pay things back. Those who helped us, we need to help them. And with that, Byron, tell us a little bit about your background.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for asking about my background. I can trace my family history back to about the 1840s. And I know for most African Americans can't go back that far because records weren't kept very well. But my great-great-grandmother was born into slavery. And my great-grandfather and others in that generation were born into slavery, Callaway County, Missouri. And, you go forward several generations, and I had a couple of great-great-uncles who served in the American Civil War. And I didn't know that until about 20 years ago, actually. But I grew up in a small town in Missouri. My parents did not go to high school. Back when they grew up, African Americans could not go to the high school in our local town or in our county. So when they got to 8th grade, Rudy, they were educated. And both parents were domestics. They went into the workforce. My mom was a maid. She also took in laundry for some of the wealthier families in town and, washed clothes and ironed shirts. My dad was a janitor mostly, although he did other jobs around town like mowing lawns and raking leaves and painting and things like that to help make ends meet. But what they gave me beyond anything material was just a work ethic. They taught me how to work and how to observe and take advantage of opportunities that were out there. And of course, I went to all African American schools until I was in 6th grade. In 1967, the elementary schools in my hometown were integrated. It took 13 years after the Bryon decision by the Supreme Court, and I didn't know many of my white high school classmates until 6th grade. So that was a turning point for my hometown, but I learned humility growing up. I learned hard work and learned just to have a high level of integrity. And when time came to go to college, I had the option to go to college. And I took that, went to Westminster College, earned an undergraduate degree, and enrolled in Army ROTC while I was at Westminster. And then when I finished Westminster, accepted a commission into the U.S. Army as an officer and ended up serving 33 years. So that was fun. But that's my upbringing in Missouri. My 2 siblings and I did go to high school and get a high school diploma. That was a major plus for my family because our parents didn't have that opportunity when they grew up. But I had a very solid foundation growing up, Rudy.
But what I find interesting, and I would venture to say that this is the case with your family. I mean, my mother didn't get past the 6th grade and she barely spoke English. Mm-hmm. And despite not having an education, she knew its value. Mm-hmm. And she pounded in my head, you have to be educated. Did you get the same thing from your parents? Son, you don't want to work as hard as we do. You don't want to do the work we do. Study, become educated.
Yes. And I'll tell you what surprised me. When I looked at my parents, Rudy, and I looked at their peers of their age group and their generation, my parents were 2 of the few that could read and write. There are many of their peers that for some reason they just were largely illiterate. But my parents could read and write, and they encouraged us kids to not just study, but to read. And this very day, I will I am always reading a book of some type, usually nonfiction or history. But you're right. My parents encouraged the education and taking advantage of our opportunities to read, write, and learn.
It's a dream that was not fulfilled with them,
Mhm.
but they wanted it to be fulfilled with their kids.
Yes.
In my case, my mother knew how far she was going to go, but she said at the very least my sons could be successful. So if
Yes.
you trace your lineage back to, you go from slaves to free to now a major general. That's quite an incredible trajectory.
It certainly is. And I'll tell you, when I earned my undergraduate degree from Westminster College, which was in my hometown, I think my parents had more pride than I did. I mean, they were beaming to see their son not just finish high school, but earn a bachelor's degree from Westminster College, a college that um, it's still not very diverse, and they understood the history of Westminster. And to see their son earn an undergraduate degree, Rudy, they were proud, very, very proud.
Almost as if they earned the degree.
Yes,
It's like they earned it. I worked hard for that degree.
that's true.
I know my mother felt the same way when I graduated from law school. She's like, you would have thought she graduated from law school,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
it was a good feeling. It is a good feeling, isn't it, to see that you've made them proud
That's right.
and that you've accomplished something despite all the adversity.
That's right.
Because growing up in a town like that, believe me, I spent 30 years in Missouri.
Yes.
I went to law school in St. Louis and lived there
Mhm.
for many years. And there's St. Louis, and then there's outstate, which can have a different, type of mindset.
That's right.
So you not only have to go with the challenges of, say, not perhaps having a lot of money, but to people who want to stand in your way in a sense and say you don't deserve to be successful or you're not smart enough to be successful. How did you confront those types of challenges?
You know, there are naysayers out there, Rudy, and people who are negative. And we've all heard the term: you take lemons and try to make lemonade, and something that you can drink and enjoy. I had peer pressure plays huge. It plays huge when you and I were growing up, and it plays huge today, where a lot of individuals kind of get off on the wrong track and want to draw people like you and me who worked hard and studied, draw us down the wrong path. But I felt peer pressure is tremendous, and being able to overcome that and just do what's right, to do your homework, prepare for test, work. And I'll tell you something I learned growing up. When I was 12 years old, I was a paper deliverer. I had a paper route, and I had papers that were delivered when I got out of school, and I'd roll them up and had my 70 some customers. I'd go around and deliver papers. And at the age of 12, I learned responsibility. I learned you have a task to accomplish, delivering papers, whether it's rainy or cold or hot. You've got to get them out there. And I think having that early experience in working helped me understand responsibility and getting things done and setting priorities. Deliver your papers, come home, eat supper, and do your homework. So that to me was very easy, Rudy.
I can identify with you on that. In your case, it was selling papers. In my case, it was shining shoes in country western bars at the age of 10. So I'm a Puerto Rican kid, half Dominican in Lorain, Ohio, shining shoes, and I knew every Hank Williams country western song because I heard them in all the taverns. You're cheating hard, Bobby Vinton, roses are red, my love. Oh, I can't tell you how many times I heard that. So to this day, when I travel extensively to Latin America and I see a shoe shine boy, I give him $5,
Absolutely.
and that's his payment for the week, because that's the kind of stuff that brings back memory.
Very nice.
But Byron, I mean, you have all this stuff that happens in life that motivates you. But what was the defining moment? What was you said, I've got to get out of here. I'm not doing this. There's something better for me. Is there one particular defining moment there?
The one defining moment I will tell you, Rudy, I worked in a brick factory in my hometown that's since closed. It paid union wages. One summer between my I guess my freshman and sophomore year at Westminster, I got hired at Harbison Walker Brick Refractories. They're in Fulton. It paid union wages, which were in Fulton were huge. And I worked 8 hours a day and would take any overtime they would give me. And toward the end of the summer, when I was about to go back to my sophomore year at Westminster, we were eating lunch in the lunchroom, and I told some of the gentlemen that were there, I said, I might just not go back to school this fall and just work another semester and make some more money, save money, and go back in January. And this gentleman, his name is Mr. Ben Ray. He's passed away probably 20 years ago. He told me, he said, you better go back to school. Well, otherwise, you'll be just like us working here, 8-hour job, 40 hours a week, making pretty good money, but you will not go any further. So my advice to you is go back to school. And I went back to school. I missed those big paychecks every week, but I finished my education on time in 4 years. But that to me was a defining moment. Yeah, I could make money in the short term, but getting an education, earning an undergraduate degree was huge. And that advice that Mr. Ray gave me meant a lot to me, Rudy.
Everyone has a defining moment from all my talks with people. There's a moment that said, this is the moment. Mine was getting up, sitting on my bed, and all of a sudden I said, I have to study. I better start studying because I had the worst study habits in the world. And that's when I move forward. But you said something interesting about working in the factory, making money, because a number of my high school friends say, why are you even bother going to college? You're going to go to college, you're going to come back at the factory and make what I'm making, and you're going to pay for all that education. Mm-hmm. And all I could think about was, well, yeah, but I'm still going to go. Because at that point, there was no turning back. I think once you make a decision, wouldn't you agree, Bryon, that when you say you decide to do something, there's no turning back? Because the moment you say, I changed your mind, you feel like, oh, I failed. Mm-hmm. I chickened out. I copped out, right?
That's true. That's right.
So you go to college and then you decide to go in the military. What was it about the military that intrigued you?
Rudy, it's interesting you asked that question. When I finished college, I could have gone into the active Army, which I did, or I could have gone into the National Guard or Reserves and, 1 weekend a month, summer training, and gone into corporate America at that point. But I went active duty. And my plan, Rudy, was to spend 3 years on active duty, which was my obligation, and then go to law school and become an attorney like you. But I took the LSAT, scored pretty well on it, applied to 2 different law schools, was accepted. And it came down to a 1-month period where I had to make a decision to accept one of the law school seats or stay in the military. And I said, I like this military stuff. I enjoy leading. I enjoy making decisions. I enjoy traveling around, meeting different people. So I stayed 29 more years in the military and have no regrets. So my plan was to fulfill my obligation and then go to law school and go into the law field as an attorney in some either contracts or domestic law, what have you. But I like the military leadership opportunities and helping others improve themselves in the armed forces. So I stayed another 30 years.
My 17-year-old's diehard wants to be, no offense, Bryon, but he wants to be a Marine, not the Army. But he wants to go into the Marines. Okay, he gets up every morning at 5 to work out. But what you just said to me is a very important point for young people, and that is it's okay to change your mind. Absolutely. If you have a goal that you want to go to law school, but there's something else you like better, the fact that you change doesn't mean that you should be disappointed.
Right.
Because you are exploring your options and you like the military. You're obviously very successful in the military. And it's okay to change the mind. What's not okay is to make up excuses for changing your mind when you haven't really tried.
That's right. That's right. We all can change our minds. Sometimes things don't work out, and we find that we want to do something different. But life is too short to do something you don't enjoy doing. And my core purpose in life, Rudy, is to use my knowledge, skills, background, and experience to make a difference. That is my core purpose in life, and I want to do what I want to do at this stage of my life and try to help other people the best I can.
And you're doing a great job of it with all your community work.
Mhm.
Let's talk a little more about the military. So you're in the military, and you hear about all kinds of issues with racism in the military, and I'm sure you experienced some of it. But what were some of your biggest obstacles in the military for you? Because you've obviously overcame them, and I think the reason for this question is you became a major general.
Well, Rudy, I must tell you, success to me is not defined by how much money you have, what kind of car you drive, or what military rank you achieve. One of the best officers I know that I served with is now a retired lieutenant colonel, a retired three ranks below a major general like I am. He just had a couple of people he worked for who did mentor him, that treated him, in my view, unfairly, and he retired much, much too early. I could very easily be him. The military and any other sector of society is about timing and about who you interact with. I was lucky to have had people that mentored me, that coached me, overlooked my shortcomings. I have some, we all do. And I was lucky to have achieved the rank of Major General. I'm not any better than anybody else. I just happened to have gotten lucky and had good people to come along and mentor me. But the military gives you an opportunity to improve yourself. It's not perfect. There are still racial issues in the military. There are still individuals who are against those who might be part of the LGBTQ community, against someone because of their religion, whether they're Muslims or Jewish or what have you. But when you look at racism in general, let's take the military as you asked, Rudy. You must look at how it fits in with our larger society. Our nation, in my view, is as divided as it's been in my entire life. Even growing up in
Exactly.
Fulton, Missouri, our nation, Rudy, is as divided now as I've seen it in my entire life. There is a general lack of civility in every sector of society. I was watching a sports show a week or two ago, and there were two commentators who were yelling at each other about which team was the best. But our nation is moving toward a phase of divisiveness, Rudy, that I have never seen. And it's only expected that that would transcend into the military, higher education, corporate America, sports. I mean, we saw a coach who had to resign a week or two ago because emails he sent that had some bad language in it that was not nice, I guess. And I'm sure if you would look at every other front office of most sports teams, you probably find the same thing. But in general, our nation really is divided. And that would only transcend to the military and sports and higher education.
And corporate America.
Yes.
Interestingly, I travel to Latin America quite a bit, and some of
Mhm.
the comments I get from some of my colleagues there is, "What's going on in your country? Like, really, what's going on?" Because they also feel a lot of this anti-immigration resentment,
Yes. Oh, yes.
especially when I travel to Mexico, and some question, why do they hate us so much?
Yes.
I you bring up a point, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. This is even the racism that I've experienced as a young boy, what you've experienced as a young boy. Racism is geographical, it's situational. And if you look at Jews, Irish, the Italians, that everyone's had a history of of racism, but it's been the longest against African Americans and Jews,
Hmm.
in the sense that the persecution still continues. Everyone's had like their little episodes, and then they're all right. You know what I'm saying? But Hispanics, African Americans, and even this anti-Jewish sentiment, that's been going on forever. And You wonder if it'll ever end, and you hope it'll end. But what I find about that is that they now have a voice.
Yes.
There's a voice, and without getting into who's a good president or who's not, but it seems today that there is a voice for these people. Not that they didn't exist before, but now they've been somewhat legitimized.
Yes. Yes.
And with the advent of the media, the Facebook, the internet, things being instantaneous and news cycle being 15 minutes, it's now kind of just, it's there all over the place.
Yes. Yes. It certainly is. And I'll tell you one example that you talk about the news cycle. That's not really new. That goes back to, let's look at Desert Storm back in early 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when the late now General Colin Powell was the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman, and Secretary of Defense was Vice President um, Dick Cheney, going back 30 years. They were preparing for a news conference that they would do every day. And they'd sit down and talk about what had happened in Afghanistan or in Iraq. And they would call General Schwarzkopf and he'd update them. General Powell told a story about when they had their update with General Schwarzkopf and took the 10-minute walk from their office down to the press room. Something happened in Iraq. Some major incident happened. And when they got there, the newscasters knew about it and were asking questions about this incident that happened
way before they knew.
2 minutes earlier, and they hadn't prepared for it. But the news cycle, you're right, with the Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, and other type platforms, there's a 24/7 instantaneous news cycle out there, Rudy.
It is crazy, but in your situation, did you feel that you had to work harder because of, say, some of the racism and some of the obstacles?
And I think that's one thing my parents taught me, that I would have to, the analogy a friend of mine uses to this very day is you have to run 110 yards for a 100-yard race. You've got to run a little bit farther against the wind and sometimes uphill to finish that 100-yard race. And yes, I felt quite often that I've had to work harder. Whether I did or not was irrelevant, but I've always felt I had to work a bit harder. I had to turn in a better product than my peers in many cases. And I think that helped me to a degree, Rudy.
It does help you. Some people look at it as a negative thing, but I think it just helps you practice for the marathon race, the marathon of life, that you're going to work harder than everybody else because you have to. It's sad that we feel that, well, people don't expect much from us, or perhaps they expect to fail. So when we succeed, they're either pleasantly surprised or they're openly jealous.
Mm-hmm.
One or the other.
That's right.
But it's still, we needed to work harder.
That's true.
Because you go in with one strike against them. People often talk about white privilege, and people confuse white privilege with, a white man coming from a wealthy family. But to me, all white privilege means is that you get shot, for walking down the street because you're black, or, you don't get stopped and arrested because you're black.
That's right.
And you don't have those hurdles. So it's not about the money. So so you decided to make a career out of the military when you were only going to be there for 3 years.
That's right.
What sparked okay, I'm going to make this the long term? Because, as you know better than me, the military is, you're either up or you're out.
That's true. That's true. Well, one thing I felt like I enjoyed it. Again, the first 3 years I traveled. I think I did a tour in Korea, so I had some international experience, and traveled around the United States for training purposes, and had gone to a couple of schools that I think helped me develop. And I enjoyed the military, and I thought that I would enjoy that more than I would if I was in corporate America. I enjoyed leading people, helping individuals to improve their lives, to build a team that accomplishes some goal, whatever that goal might be. And as you rise in rank, you build a team of teams as you progress upward in the ladder of rank. So I enjoyed it. And people ask me sometimes, well, Byron, why did you choose the military over corporate America?
That's exactly one of my questions for you here. Why
Yes.
did you choose the military?
Yeah, well, and that's a great question. I'm glad I got to it first, Rudy, by the way. But anyway, it's not either or. And for me, it's both because I spent 33 years in the military. And for the past 10 years, I've been in corporate America on corporate boards doing leadership type work. So it's not one or the other. You can do both. And I'll give you, you mentioned the Marine Corps. My son joined the Marines out of high school and served 2 tours in Iraq. Um, he did his 4 year obligation and got shot on his second tour to Iraq as an infantry Marine. I'm real proud of him for that. Was as a valorous decoration that he earned in combat, and he's now a mortgage loan originator in corporate America. Lives in California, so he did his 4 years in the Marine Corps, used his GI Bill to get his education, to get certified and get his degrees, and is now working in corporate America. So it's not one or the other; it's both, and they can be complementary. And like you can join the reserves or National Guard and work all week, and then on weekends go out and train in your National Guard duties.
It's like the building block. I wrote a piece once that said knowledge is never wasted,
That's right.
no matter what it is you do. So what you learn in the military, you build up and can use in corporate America. Our chief compliance officer for one of our subsidiaries is retired Marine JAG officer,
Nice.
and now he's the chief compliance officer for a substantial company.
Mhm.
If I were a young man today, I would seriously consider the military. When you look at what jobs are out there for lawyers or other professionals, as a way to perhaps gain some experience. I there was a time, years ago, where you had the choice of going to jail or going into the army. Well, we can lock you up, or you can join. You can join the army. But now the army is an elite. They're not just taking anybody. You have to show some merit, and you have to work hard.
And one fact I'll share with you, Rudy, it's a good point you make about jail or the military in the day, but today it's not like that. And I'll tell you what, one of my concerns, Rudy, is that only 27% of Americans between the ages of 17 and 30 can join the military. The rest are ineligible. Obesity, criminal records, they don't have either a GED or high school diploma, and then certain prescription medications that they take in combinations will disqualify them. So my concern is that only 27% of young Americans are meet the requirements to join the military, and the other 73% are doing something else. But that number to me is startling, Rudy.
It is when you consider a population of 300 million people.
That's right. That's right.
300 million, only 27% are eligible. And you go to other countries where military service is mandatory
That's correct.
for a certain period of time. I almost think it should be mandatory here, in the sense for people out of high school to spend at least a year in the military as a training ground. But that's not our mindset. Now, Byron, during your course in the military, you developed 10 rules for leadership, which I found to be fascinating. Can you talk, how did you formulate these rules? And you gave those at a speech, I believe, in Westminster.
Mhm.
Um, Tell us how you came up with those rules.
Well, those evolved over time, and usually from lessons I learned the hard way, some mistakes I made, or some errors I made in decisions, or what have you. But those evolved over time. And again, those are my top 10 leadership lessons. I could write 100 of them very easily, as I'm sure you could. But those are my top 10 lessons. But really, they evolved over time, just experiences. And when I began writing those out, I could have written 50 without even blinking. But those are my top 10 that kind of summarize my experiences over those 33 years in uniform and the time I've got in corporate America. I'm still leading in some ways in corporate America now, but But those evolved over time.
I think once you're a leader, you're always going to be a leader,
Hmm.
no matter where you're located. You're always going
Yeah.
to be a leader. I'm going to go through them briefly because I really enjoyed them. Know who you are. If you don't truly know yourself, you cannot effectively lead others.
Yes.
That is so true.
It's about being self-aware. You must understand yourself. Know what your strengths are. What are your shortcomings? And if you're a leader, find someone who brings some strengths in one of your shortcoming areas. But you need to be self-aware to understand what your values are and what are your biases. Yes.
Humility is a very important part of leadership. And knowing what your limitations are and bringing people in who can supplement them,
That's
as
right.
opposed to a leader who says, "I am never wrong.
That's
I'm
true.
always right, and it's my way." Also, consistency in the decisions you make, hiring, promoting, salaries, and firing. I guess you really picked that up from the military with all the regimented rules they have. And
Yes, you need to be fair and you need to be consistent. You can't give one person a higher reward, and then when someone else comes along who's of equal rank and responsibility, give him or her a lower award. You must be consistent in how you do that. And when you promote someone, make sure that the process is fair. And that is something that I try to use every day in my current roles.
well, your fourth one is have passion for what you do. That's, of course, universal. Thousands and thousands of people have said that. But one I like a lot that you said was number four, have compassion for those you lead. If you don't genuinely care about people, you can't lead them.
People know when you care about them, Rudy. You can talk it all day long, but your actions speak louder than the words that you speak or write. If you don't care about people in any sector, whether you're a football coach or whether you're a Fortune 100 company executive, if you don't care about people, you can't lead them. And they will know immediately. They know that you're just providing false praise, that the things you talk about are just hollow. They will know when you are sincere, Rudy. So you must care about those you lead.
But I think we need to define what caring is, because caring is not necessarily touchy feely, but it's I view it as having a genuine concern for them and a concern that they do better,
Yes,
that they be at their best. That's how I view the term caring.
that's right.
Uh, because people can confuse caring with not putting in the necessary discipline that you want or that you need. Well, he doesn't care because look, he's making me work so hard. He obviously doesn't care about me.
Yes.
Those are just excuses. I also like your number five on transparency. I'm a big believer. I hire a lot of outside firms
Hmm.
and pay significant amounts of legal fees for the types of cases I handle. I tell them up front, you will always know where you stand with me.
Hmm.
When I'm happy, you're going to know it. When I'm not happy, you're going to know it.
Yes.
And then I set out my rules for them ahead of time. So I like what you said about transparency, because rather than just bringing them in, I say this is what I expect from you, so that there is no doubt of what I want. There's no doubt of what it will take you to make me happy. And that's what I got from your number five is transparency. Be transparent. Let people know what to expect.
Communication is important. And I think that unless something is privileged, like it's confidential, some
Hmm.
personnel issue, share information. If a company is about to go through a downsizing for whatever reason, tell individuals that so they can prepare themselves so that when you do show up in a month or 2 months and say we're going to reduce our staff by 20%, they know about that. But share what you can share. And I would say be transparent because communication is key. I've tried to overshare information as long as I don't violate any kind of privacy type acts, privacy rights of an individual. But
Sure.
be transparent.
Exactly. The one I really like also is number six, and that is don't mistake team playership and loyalty for being a yes man. They are drastically different.
Yes.
I tell the people who've worked under me, and I tell people who I pay as outside counsel, I don't need a yes man. I'm a lawyer with 40 years experience. Yes, there are a lot of things I've experienced, but I can be wrong.
Yes.
And you need to be able to push back if you think I've made a mistake. And I've had several situations in my world where I've thought of something and they said, you know what? I wouldn't recommend that. Tell me why. Okay, you're right. Okay. You are correct. So I can't stand a yes man. It's the kind of person where you go to a restaurant and one person loves the food, the other person hates it. So this person in the middle says, "Oh, that food was terrible." You're right, it was horrible. And then you go to the other person, that pizza was the best pizza in the world. Oh, you're right, it was the best pizza in the world. Those kind of people have a way of, vetting themselves out, outing themselves. But that was one of my favorites of don't mistake the yes men. I also like the human dimension argument. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I've got my opinions on it, but tell me what your view on that is.
Well, in corporate America, there you must have a profit. You must finish, or you could close the business. Ultimately, you need to do well financially, but ultimately, even in corporate America and factories and any sector of society, there's a human dimension to everything. And if you take care of people, show compassion with them, train them, help them be a part of a larger team, the company will survive and do well. But there's a human dimension to everything. It's not just about the bottom line and coming up with a large profit for your shareholders. Ultimately, it's about people and the entire stakeholders of an organization, whether it's the stockholders, the employees, the senior staff, the board of directors, and their families are all a part of that. But there is a human dimension, Rudy, to everything that we do.
I think the flip side to that, and where one must be careful, is that people will confuse compassion with weakness.
They do often.
It does not mean that they'll think, oh, he's not going to do anything. He's nice. He's not going to fire me. He's too nice. He's not going to do it. But or they say he's a weakling because he cares about us. So it's a fine line, I think, because people will often confuse that. I'm going to skip number 8, which is magic, but I want to get into the other ones because I think we're going to spend more time on number 8. Number 9 is keep yourself physically, mentally, emotionally fit. Of course, that's very military in the sense that they don't do that in corporate America, where they say, hey, you should run so much, you should exercise so much. And I do believe that physical fitness has a lot to do with mental activity. And your other one is act with integrity. And I think we should do that in all our lives. Okay.
Yes.
But the one I think I want to spend more time on is understand carefully, manage your own biases. Don't let your biases interfere with making the right decision. That's, I think, is a gem. Okay. I think that's a diamond. I think the issue with it is we often have times identifying our biases.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know often what our biases are until somebody tells us, by the way. So, for example, when somebody says, I'm not a racist, but yet they'll look at you and say, oh my God, you're a general? Or you retired as a general? Would they say that to a white guy? Oh my God, you were a general. When I told my friends that I became a lawyer, I said, what? You? Yeah, me. Really? And not just, with the white community, but the African American, Hispanic community, those biases exist and we have a hard time identifying them.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Yeah, we all have biases, and I'm sure that you and I have probably been on the receiving end of a lot of those negative biases. But ultimately, a leader has got to understand what his or her biases are. And then when you're making a decision, don't allow your bias to hinder the right decision. And one example is board work. You have a board seat coming open. and you have two candidates that are equally qualified. They've got financially literate. They've got the skills for that sector, and you pick up the resumes, and someone went to the University of Texas at Austin, and someone went to Westminster, and you're going to pick the Texas graduate because you went to Texas A&M, and you're biased, and you favor those who are from Texas. And that's probably a poor example, but it's one. But when you're making a decision, you've got to put your biases aside and make the right decision for that organization, that team, that company, or what have you.
Well, bias is not necessarily racially motivated. I mean, you don't like broccoli, you have a bias against broccoli. Bush said, I don't like broccoli. but bias is, most of the time, it's going to be construed as racial bias or
True.
cultural bias. And so when you talk to people on diversity and inclusion, and they say, well, we can't find anybody. And I go back to them and I say, well, did you look at universities like in Texas? Did you look at universities like Howard University, Lincoln University? Did you look at those types of universities? Did you really look? Or did you just say, you just assumed I'm not going to find them, I didn't look, and there's your bias right there?
That's right. They're out there. There are people who are qualified all over the United States. Look, as you mentioned, Rudy, look for them at Lincoln and Howard, and not just at Harvard and UPenn and the University of Chicago.
I think so, and I think there's also bias within our communities,
Mm-hmm.
and the bias I see is that automatically you're going to not like every white person you meet because you're going to assume they're a racist.
That's true. That's
Okay,
right.
and not every white person's a racist,
That's true. Mm-hmm.
and I also think that the bias that's used is because of people have an inferiority complex, because they don't. I've seen it in the African American community, and I've seen it in the Hispanic community, where those who get ahead don't want the others to get ahead. I got mine because I am worthy.
That's
You
right.
obviously are not worthy. I think that is the worst thing we can do to each other. And that is one of the things that keeps us from being a more significant force than we could be.
Mm-hmm. That's
When
true.
we start the infighting within ourselves.
That's true. That's exactly right. And you make, I think you may have seen the clip. I forget who made the statement about 10 or 15 years ago about, in some poor African American families and neighborhoods, a parent will spend $200 on a pair of Air Jordan tennis shoes for their kids and not spend it on getting a tutor for them to improve their math skills. And I forget which celebrity said that, but they took heat for saying that. But that's probably true. Parents could don't spend $200 on a pair of shoes, spend maybe 50, and the rest spend on maybe a tutoring program to help them improve their writing skills. But you're right, there is a lot of infighting within certain ethnic groups. So I agree with you there.
Well, more so in the Hispanic community, I think, than the African American community, because Simon Bolivar could not unite all of Latin America because of the huge differences between Peruvians, Ecuadorians. For example, Peruvians and Ecuadorians fought a war over
Mm-hmm.
land.
Mm-hmm.
You got the Argentines, you've got the Mexicans, totally different cultures, and people lump us in as one. I even had one of my friends I grew up with said, "Don't use the word Hispanic. That's the white man's word for us. We're Latinos."
Okay.
And I said, "Well, that's news to me, Charlie. I didn't know that." But the biases are something I think that you need to wake up every day and you need to think, am I making that decision for the right reason? Or am I letting something influence it? And that's the best way, I think, to be biased. Now, bias doesn't mean that you go the other way around because you don't want to perceive to be a racist. You still goes back to your other rule: make the objective decision.
That's right.
If they're qualified, they're qualified. But if they come from an ethnic group that has significant challenges, then yeah, you do need to make some concessions for them. You need to probably spend more time so that they can develop.
That's right. If they're fully qualified.
If they're fully qualified,
Yes.
because some of these people, I mean, our people didn't have the opportunities that others had.
Mm-hmm.
And for years, remember the educational testing, was people accused of for being racially biased towards middle class kids and people, wealthy kids. Somebody from the ghetto supposedly wouldn't do well historically
Mm-hmm.
on those tests. But that's a different issue for another one. I wanted to add, I know our time is running, but I wanted to add one of my own.
Okay.
And that is, a leader needs to be able to connect with people.
Yes. Absolutely.
If
You're
you
right.
cannot connect, there's nothing else you can do. And when I say connection, you have to be able to not just deliver the message, but deliver the message in such a way that's going to keep them interested.
That's right.
And it's
That's
going to
right.
keep them motivated.
Great comment. I like that.
An old
Very
client of
appropriate.
mine in the UK was very successful, small business. And his name was Liz, because his wife is from New Zealand. Liz, I love to hear that name. What is the secret to your success? And he said to me, Rudy, I'll never forget it. I want people to work for me who want my job. That's who I want.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't want my job, they're not going to work hard.
Yes. That's
Not
true.
everyone's going to get my job, but everyone should have the hope of getting the job.
Yes. That's right.
And so that's the one I would add to your list. If, with all due respect, I think that should be number 11,
Well,
because you cannot connect with people if you cannot lead, if you cannot connect with them.
yeah. That's a good point. What I would tell you is these are my top 10. If you want to add that to your and make it 11, that'll be your 11.
It's going to
But
be
but but
I'm going to plagiarize them. I'm going to plagiarize all
hmm,
yours and then add mine.
but you're right. You have to connect with people, whether it's with your peer companies or with
Uh-huh.
your um, um, the larger organization, the holding company, or your subordinates. You've got to connect with people, and you can't do that, then you will not be as successful.
And it's important, not so much the message, but how you deliver the message.
It is. That's true.
You can say somebody, you really screwed up. Or you can say, well, this may have been a mistake, but this is how you can improve.
That's right.
And that's the compassion. And that's just in everything,
That's true. Hmm.
with everybody. One final question for you. What would you say to your 19-year-old self?
Great question. I would say the short answer would be is that you can compete because my upbringing in Fulton, schools didn't integrate until late 60s, going to Westminster, which were very few African Americans there. Um, I could have taken the avenue that I'm kind of outclassed here and I will not be as successful as others. But what I would tell my 19-year-old self is you can be competitive in any sector of society, the military, corporate America, higher education, law, or what have you. But I would just say the short answer is, Byron, you can compete.
I've thought about that question too for myself, and the one what I would say to my 19-year-old self is, don't ever say no to yourself.
Nice.
Let them tell you no.
That's right.
But don't you be the one to set that obstacle in front of you, because there'll be plenty of people who tell you no.
Absolutely. Every day.
And you just show up and you work until somebody says, we're locking the door.
That's right.
And even if they lock the door, you find a way to pound it and knock until somebody says, what do you want?
That's
You say,
right.
I want to get in.
That's right.
Well, Byron, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. I know you're very busy. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me and the people who are going to view this video. I want to just say to everybody, please subscribe to my channel. Click the subscribe button below. We're going to have many more great interviews. Thank you so much. I look forward to perhaps Byron talking to you at another time.